many of you volunteer? Raise your hand if you volunteer. Excellent. Volunteerism is one of my core values. I'm passionate about it. I look for a major volunteer activity every year and a couple little ones as time and schedule allows. I moved to Chicago 15 years ago from the East Coast. Didn't know anybody here, didn't know where I was even moving to. So I certainly didn't know what I was going to volunteer for, but I thought if the student was ready, About 6 months after moving here, I read about an event, the Avon Breast Cancer Walk. Some of you may be familiar with it. I signed up to walk 60 miles in 2.5 days from Kenosha, Wisconsin to downtown Chicago. You're looking at me like, why would you do that? I had 4 really good reasons. Number one, I just moved to the Midwest. I had no clue where the Midwest was. Folks, I'm sorry to tell you this. When you live on the East Coast, we know there's a West Coast. We kind of forget there's anything in between. So I thought if I walked from Wisconsin to Chicago, I could see a couple cities and towns along the way, know where I was living. Second reason, they anticipated 4,000 walkers. I didn't know anyone in Chicago. I thought I could make some friends, get a date if I was lucky. Third reason, I owned a health club. It was one of my 9 businesses. I was always in the fitness industry. I loved to challenge myself physically, and I'd never walked 60 miles. And lastly, and most important, my best friend, Sherry LeBed Davis, is a breast cancer survivor. So I thought I could raise the money and walk in her honor. It had all the components of being the right volunteer activity for me. Here's what I didn't know. My idea of the great outdoors, the distance from the limo to the hotel lobby. I was kind of like Goldie Hawn in Private Benjamin. Remember that movie? They gave her army fatigue. She said, does this come in any other color? That would have been me. This New York City gal had never really shopped in an Army Navy store, bought things like backpacks, camp teens, pup tents, just not in my vernacular, but I was up for the challenge. The first day we walked 17 miles in the rain. Not a good hair day, Pat. We got into base camp at night. I was seriously questioning my sanity. Why was I doing this? I took a shower in a truck. I brushed my teeth in a freestanding sink in a parking lot. I slept in a pup tent so little you had to get dressed lying down using a flashlight. Make sure you're putting your underwear on the right end. Why was I doing this? But the next day, I got my answer. They got us up at 4 a.m., not a time I usually like to get up, but they wanted us to hit the road at 5 when the sun was coming up. And at 5 a.m., when we started that walk, there was my answer. There were people on the front lawns of their homes, sitting in beach chairs with banners that they had made that said, thank you for doing this for my mother, for my sister, for my brother. When I saw those people out there at 5 a.m., I knew I was doing it. They didn't have a banner and a beach chair. They were out there in their robe and slippers, pajamas, just to wave us, say thank you. Cars drove by. They couldn't get the window down fast enough to throw a hand out and yell thank you. Everywhere we walked. And then the little kids who set up their lemonade stand and baked us chocolate chip cookies and made us homemade cards. And I collected these cards. They were so special. This one said, thank you for walking for all of us. We're so proud of you because you're a lifesaver, with a little lifesaver candy attached to it. This one said, you're on a roll, girl. Go, girl. It had a Tootsie Roll that I ate. As I collected these cards, I thought, how great are these parents? By knowing what they're doing for their children, by having them volunteer at such a young age. They're fostering their self-esteem. They're creating a core value of volunteerism. How great are these parents? We walked 22 miles that day in the hot, blazing sun. I was tired. I was dirty. I was blistered. I had rashes I'd never seen before, and I dragged my body into base camp at night, and 600 volunteers had pitched our tents for us and cooked us a hot meal. And I witnessed kindness at a level that I'd never experienced before in my life. You see, when you volunteer, you feel so good about yourself that you're naturally kind to others. But the last day was truly the most inspiring. They wanted us to finish together. You can imagine 4,000 walkers. We had young, we had old, we had physically challenged, we had every shape, every size, every ethnicity. We even had breast cancer survivors making the walk. So everybody spread out at their own pace, 2.5 days, 60 miles. So they created 2 areas. They created a holding area, and 1 mile away was the closing ceremony area. And when you got to that holding area at 12 noon, you were done. Collapse on the grass, take a nap. Eat your 100th granola bar. Network with another person. And by 12 noon, we were all assembled. And they gave out T-shirts. They gave out blue T-shirts to the several thousand walkers making the walk. They gave out white T-shirts to the 600 volunteers, pink T-shirts to the 200 breast cancer survivors also making the walk. And they asked us to line up accordingly. And would we walk the final mile together along the Chicago lakefront, holding hands in complete silence in honor of those who'd been lost to this disease. And there wasn't a dry eye on this walk. Could you imagine the deafening silence of 4,000 people walking and the tens of thousands that lined the Chicago lakefront? Not a word. I particularly remember the man who walked in front of me. I stared at the back of his T-shirt for that 1 mile as I walked, and on the back of his T-shirt was a photograph of his mother. And underneath it said simply, "For her." There was not a dry eye on this walk. As we approached the closing ceremony area, we'd been asked to invite our friends and family to meet and greet us. There must have been about 10,000 people waiting for us, and the roar that erupted, the cheer that contrasted against that silence, will be a moment that will live in my heart and soul forever. And in that moment, I felt like they were cheering just for me. Because that's how special you feel when you volunteer. That's how special you feel when you step outside of yourself for a cause greater than you, or you know in your own way that you've touched a life of someone you know, but you don't know. You know you've done something bigger than who you are.